Hello and welcome to this session. We are going to be talking about implementing and using security tools. We're going to begin by reflecting on the threat landscape. This includes threats we or our peers face, and we'll start by answering the question, what risks have we or our peers faced recently? This may include physical threats, legal restrictions, digital targeting, or other forms of repression. The goal of this is not just to name these risks, but to also recognize that these threats are not isolated. Whether we are in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, or Europe, we are seeing common patterns of repression globally. Therefore, by naming them together, we begin to see that our struggles are connected, and so can our strategies be. These aren't isolated cases, these are patterns we are seeing globally. Now we are going to be looking at some common global trends that many of us have experienced and which we can connect to. The first of these is criminalization of protests through anti-assembly laws or arbitrary detentions. We also have surveillance, where the use of spyware and monitoring of social media is highly used against human rights defenders. We also have online harassment, which include trolling, doxing, gender-based digital abuse. There's also travel restrictions, where activists are denied entry or exit from countries, and also a lot of times they face visa denials. We also have smear campaigns, through which state and non-state actors are able to defame human rights defenders. Finally, we have legal repression, where fake charges or strategic lawsuits, also known as slaps, are continuously meted against human rights defenders unjustly. Now, if you recognize your experience in these examples, know that you are not alone. Sharing these risks builds our collective awareness, and with awareness comes strength. Recognizing shared patterns is how we start to build shared resistance. Now, basing on holistic security, security is not just about technology, it's about our bodies, our minds, and our communities, and the systems we move through. For human rights defenders, threats don't just come from malware or surveillance, they also come from burnout, arrests, attacks, fear, and anxiety. That's why we use a holistic security framework to help us protect ourselves and our communities in a complete way. Now, we are going to be looking at the 5 components of holistic security. As we deepen our understanding of security, it is vital to remember that real lasting safety isn't just about any single part of our lives or activism. Holistic security means protecting ourselves and our communities across different areas, recognizing that every aspect is connected. Let's walk through these components together. We'll start with digital security. In this era, our phones and laptops are not just tools, they can also be sources of vulnerability. This involves making sure our devices, accounts, and communications are as secure as possible through using strong passwords, encryption, practicing safe online behaviors, and being mindful of digital surveillance and hacking threats. Now we're going to be looking at physical security. This is what most people think of first: protection from direct bodily harm, surveillance, or physical intrusions. It includes things like being aware of your surroundings, having secure meeting places, for example, and making plans to travel safely, especially when risks are high. We have psychosocial well-being or psychosocial security. This is about our mental health and emotional well-being. Activism can be exhausting and traumatic. Therefore, managing stress, preventing burnout, and having spaces for healing and support are all essential for our long-term effectiveness and our personal well-being. Next, we move to what we term political and legal security. This is about understanding the environment we are operating in, the laws and policies that might protect us or put us at risk. For instance, knowing our rights during a protest, having access to legal counsel, and paying attention to changing political climates all fall within this part. Finally, we have what we call media security or narrative security. Our ability to tell and control our own stories about ourselves, our movement, and our goals is key. The narrative we put forward shapes public perceptions. It builds resilience in our communities and can even influence the risks we face. When we own our stories, instead of letting others define them, we build both power and safety. All these areas influence each other. A weakness in one area, for example like digital carelessness or burnout, can increase the risk of another. Strength in one area can protect us across the board. So therefore, let us all take a moment to think, which of these areas are we already strong in? Which ones need attention? The following slides will give you tools for each area.
What is risk assessment? Let's begin by talking about what we mean by risk assessment. In simple terms, risk assessment is a structured way of identifying and managing threats that could negatively affect our lives, our work, or our communities. It is about being proactive, not waiting for something to go wrong, but anticipating what could go wrong. The process usually starts with identifying the threats that exist around us, things that could harm us physically, digitally, psychosocially, legally, or reputationally. Then we analyze these threats to understand how likely they are to happen and how serious the consequences could be. Finally, we score or prioritize them so we know which risks to focus on first. By doing this, we gain clarity about where we are most vulnerable and where mitigation or prevention will be most effective. For human rights defenders, this process is especially important. Many operate in prolonged risky environments, face multiple and overlapping threats, or engage in sensitive works like advocacy and travel across borders. And it is worth emphasizing, risk is personal. What is risky for one person might be safe for another. It depends on our context, our identity, and the kind of the work that we do. Now, risk assessments aren't one size fits all. There are several types of risk assessments, each focusing on different aspects of your work or life. First, there is the personal risk assessment, which looks at individuals' vulnerabilities, things like personal security, habits, or visibility. Next, the organizational risk assessment, for example, risks linked to delegation, field visits, or local movements. This focuses on how a group or organization can stay safe while carrying out its mission. We also have logistical risk assessments, which deal with travel, transport, and planning, making sure the practical aspects of operations don't expose people to harm. Then there is the reputational risk assessment, how actions, communications, or associations might affect credibility or public trust. And finally, digital risk assessments, which look at online exposure, data protection, and cybersecurity, essential in today's environment. By combining these perspectives, we gain a full picture of our vulnerabilities and can design stronger, more comprehensive safety strategies. Steps to conduct a risk assessment. Conducting a risk assessment doesn't need to be complicated. It is about thinking systematically. Step 1 is to identify the risks. List what could go wrong in your situation. Step 2, analyze them. Ask how likely is this to happen and what would be the impact. Step 3, evaluate and prioritize. Since we can't control everything, we focus on what is both most likely and most damaging. Step 4, define and implement mitigation measures. These are the concrete actions, safety plans, communication protocols, or partnerships that help reduce exposure. And finally, step 5, monitor and review. Risks evolve, and so should your plans. Regularly update your assessments as new challenges arise. Once we have assessed the risks, we need clear, actionable steps for what to do when things happen. And that is where SOPs come in. So, what are SOPs and why they are important? SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure. These are written step-by-step instructions that guide how to respond in specific situations. SOPs are designed to create clarity, consistency, and safety, especially when things are uncertain or stressful. SOPs make sure that everyone on a team knows their role, what to do, who to contact, and how to act, even under pressure. They provide clarity during chaos, help maintain team coordination, ensure preparedness, and promote accountability. In short, a well-crafted SOP can be the difference between confusion and coordinated action. Now let's take a closer look at the core SOPs that every human rights defender or organization should have. The first one is the pre-departure briefing. Before heading into the field or starting any mission, make sure everyone understands the risks at the destination, their specific roles, how they will communicate, where to meet if separated, and what the emergency plans look like. Next, we have evacuation plans. This means knowing your safe exit routes, transportation options, safer zones, and having a clear decision point. For example, when exactly do you decide to leave? Then there are check-ins protocols. How often will people check in? Through what method? Who is the focal person tracking this? And what happens if someone misses a check-in? These protocols can literally save lives. Lastly, field behavior guidelines. In the field, appearances matters. Keep a low profile, be respectful when interacting with authorities and communities, and be intentional about how you move, travel, and document your work securely. To build an effective SOP, follow 6 practical steps. Identify the situation. Ask yourself what risks or scenarios happens most often or poses the greatest risk. Then define the goal. What do you want this SOP to achieve? Faster evacuation, better coordination, or what? Next, write clear, simple steps. Use plain language and keep instructions short, direct, and easy to follow even in stressful situations. And then assign roles so everyone knows who does what. Share and practice. Share the SOPs with everyone, train your team, and rehearse it until it becomes second nature. And finally, review and update regularly as conditions change, and so must our procedures and SOPs. Now that we have looked at how to plan, let's get practical with concrete checklists you can use daily to stay secure. These checklists are the daily tools that help turn awareness into consistent action. They serve as reminders, things to check before you leave for the field, before you send an email, or before you make a public statement. Let's start with one of the most critical areas today: digital security. In our work today, digital threats are as serious as physical ones. Digital security is about protecting your devices, your communications, and your data from surveillance, hacking, or accidental exposure. Here is what a strong digital security checklist looks like. Use strong and unique passwords for every account and manage them using a trusted password manager. Enable two-factor authentication on all accounts. Install encrypted messaging apps like Signal or secure emails like ProtonMail. Use a VPN on your laptop and phones, especially when using public Wi-Fi or public networks. Keep devices updated with the latest security patches. Separate personal and activist accounts. Avoid storing sensitive material on personal devices. Regularly back up important files on secure, encrypted platforms. And finally, delete old messages and chat histories that contain sensitive information. A good way to frame a digital security checklist for yourself or for your team is to ask: would I still be safe if my laptop was stolen tomorrow? If the answer is no, then your digital security needs attention. Let's now move to safety in the field work, where risks are often physical and immediate. Field safety begins long before you arrive at your destination. It is about awareness, planning, and adaptability. To have a checklist that every field team or defender can use, you should conduct a risk assessment before each mission or visit. Do not assume the situation is the same as last time. Share your itinerary and emergency contacts with a trusted person who is not traveling with you. Stay aware of your surroundings, exits, vehicles, local security presence, and unusual behaviors. Avoid predictable routines. Change your routes and timings whenever possible. Identify safe locations, for example rooms or buildings where you could take shelter if needed. Carry essential items at all times, such as your phone with emergency contacts, a power bank, first aid kit, flashlight, whistles or alarms, and copies of important documents. Debrief after each mission. Talk about what worked, what didn't work, and what you would do differently next time. Remember, being alert doesn't mean being afraid, it just means being ready. Now we move to how to protect our offices, our data, and our teams. And that takes us to operational security practices. Operational security, or in short, OPSEC, is about making sure that our daily operations, meetings, storage, or communications are protected from intrusions or manipulations. As a quick checklist for operational security, you should always restrict access to sensitive areas such as server rooms, document storage, or meeting spaces. Verify the identity of visitors, service providers. Do not assume that whoever shows up is safe. Maintain a visitor logs or sign-in procedures. Store sensitive physical documents in locked cabinets or safes. Always encrypt and securely store digital files. And lock laptops and hard drives when not in use. Shred paper records that are no longer needed and avoid disposing them in regular trash. Monitor for surveillance and be alert of any unfamiliar individuals near premises, unmarked packages, repeated suspicious vehicles, or strange USB devices. And finally, document and report any unusual incidents internally or externally. Of course, sometimes risks aren't just physical or digital, they can also be legal. So let's talk about legal preparedness. In high risk environments, legal threats are real, and being unprepared can turn a small issue into a crisis. Legal preparedness means knowing your rights and having support ready when needed. Here's your checklist. Carry a legal contact card. This should include your lawyer's number and emergency contacts. Know your national laws, especially those on identification, protest, and assembly. If approached or detained by authorities, stay calm and polite. Assert your rights to legal counsel, but don't argue or resist. Never sign documents under pressure. You can always review them later with a lawyer. Document any legal incident safely. In your documentation include time, place, people involved, and actions taken. Avoid confrontation. Prioritize your safety first and challenge violations through proper channels afterwards. And remember that legal preparedness gives you the confidence to act without fear and ensure you're never caught completely off guard. Let's also have a look at how teams can maintain accountability and collective safety through consistent communication. And that takes us to check-in protocols. To set up check-in protocols effectively, you should identify a trusted contact or focal point, someone who can track check-ins and respond quickly if there is silence. Agree on frequency and methods. For example, twice a day via Signal or a short-coded message. Use secure communication channels only. No open or insecure platforms. Define an escalation process. Decide what to do if someone misses a check-in. For example, how long to wait, or who to contact, or when to escalate. Confirm safe returns after every mission or event. For sensitive operations, use code words or signals. For example, short messages that communicate safety or distress without raising suspicion. Finally, let's end with knowing what to carry with you every day and what you should have ready in case you ever need to evacuate. For everyday carry essentials, you must have a mobile phone with emergency contacts preloaded, communication tools installed such as Signal app or Proton Mail. It is also advisable to have photocopies of your IDs or legal aid contacts and medical information, a flashlight such as LED or compact, something easy to access, and also a whistle or a personal alarm for signaling distress. In emergencies, you might have just minutes to leave and you won't have time to think. So that's why it is important to have a go bag ready. What to include in your go bag are a copies of your IDs and important legal documents, communication devices such as your phone, your chargers, your laptop, and maybe a backup SIM card, basic food and water, something enough for at least 24 to 72 hours, first aid supplies such as bandages, regular medications, painkillers, or disinfectants, clothing appropriate for your local climate, any specific safety or personal items relevant to your context, such as cash, a small flashlight, or a protective gear, or emergency blanket. Keep your go bags in an easily accessible place near an exit door, but not buried in a storage. To conclude, these checklists aren't just about procedures, they are about building a culture of preparedness. When we make these practices part of our daily routines, from digital habits to travel check ins, we don't just protect ourselves, we strengthen our whole community. Remember that safety isn't about fear, it is about freedom, the freedom to continue your work, speak out, and support others safely and sustainably. So let's make safety a culture.
Before we close today's session, I want to remind you that you're not alone in this work. Protecting ourselves and our communities can feel overwhelming, but there are resources and people ready to support you. If you are a climate justice activist or any human rights defender and find yourself in urgent need of help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can contact us directly through the email, Signal, or WhatsApp numbers displayed on this slide. Even if we might not be able to provide direct assistance, we can refer you to our trusted partners and networks who specialize in different kinds of support, whether it's legal aid, digital security help, psychosocial care, or emergency relocation. Your safety and well being matter deeply, so please bookmark these contacts and share them with your peers in need. Activism is a journey we take together. So remember, reaching out is a sign of strength.